So in today's video, we'll be creating this environment, and this video is going to be slightly longer. So you guys were requesting me to post longer videos and explain a lot of different things in detail. So this video is going to be a beginner friendly video. So you're going to learn a lot of things in this video. So you'll learn how to light your scene. You'll also learn how to use Quixel Megascan assets and merge them together. You're also going to learn how to animate the camera. After animating the camera, we are going to render it, and then we are going to take it in DaVinci Resolve. And using DaVinci Resolve, we are going to edit this and export this as a video file. So there's a lot of information packed in this video, and I'll do my best to explain everything. Also, I would like to give a huge shout out to all the members and the Patreons that support the channel. So thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. So we are going to open up Unreal Engine, and nothing fancy is going on here. I've created an empty project. So the first part of this video is going to be focused on lighting. So first, let's create a light. You can go to the create panel, and from there, you can add a directional light. So this is the main light that will contribute to the lighting. After adding the directional light, you can go in the details panel and you can enable the movable option. So the light is basically totally dynamic, and this is how we set up lights for open world games. After that, we are going to go to the create panel, and the second light element that we are going to add is a skylight. Now in the details panel, you can select real-time capture, and that just means that the light is dynamic and capturing all the sky atmosphere elements in real time. And again, you need to set all your lighting elements to movable, because we are going to use Unreal Engine's new lighting system called Lumen. So Lumen is their new lighting system, which is responsible for real-time global illumination and dynamic reflections. So Lumen is like ray tracing. So RTX that you know in games, which is associated with NVIDIA graphics cards. So that is like NVIDIA's way of calculating light and reflections. But in Unreal Engine 5, they have made their own system for lighting and reflections. So after we have added the skylight, we are going to go to visual effects, and we are going to add something called as a sky atmosphere. So you can see our sun is right there. And if you wanted to rotate the sun in your scene, you can press this shortcut key. So if you are seeing nothing, the sky atmosphere is not working for you, you need to select the directional light. And in the details panel, make sure that atmosphere sunlight is turned on. This will make sure that the directional light is the sun in your scene. So you need to specify the directional light as the primary source of lighting in your scene for the sky atmosphere system to work. After that, let's add some fog in the scene. So you can go there and add an exponential height fog object. After adding that, go in the details panel, and you can enable volumetric fog as well. Volumetric fog will give you an additional amount of realism. After you have added the fog, you can add something called as a post-process volume. So it contains effects like ambient occlusion, bloom, and you might be familiar with this in Unity as well. Unity also has a post-processing stack. So this is quite similar. So first of all, we need to make sure that the post-process volume is applied to the whole level. So basically, we need to set this as unbounded. After that, you can search for exposure, and I'm going to lock my exposure. So I don't want auto exposure. So you can set the exposure compensation to about 10. This will completely depend on the strength of your sunlight. So let's select all of these lighting elements, and let's add a new folder and group them. Now it's time for the fun part. We are going to add some Quixel Megascan assets in the scene. So to add that, you can press Ctrl space to bring up the content browser. And in the content browser, you can right click, and you will see a new option for add Quixel content. So in Bridge, you can search for different types of assets. So for this video, I'm going to use different types of forest assets. So first, we are going to add some embankments in the scene. So this is a forest embankment. So the way to download these assets is really simple. You select whichever asset that you want to download, and after that you will need to set the quality of the asset. For this video I'm going to use high quality assets as I don't need 8K textures, so I don't want to download this on the nanite quality. After that you can download the asset by pressing the download button, and once your download is done, you can press the add button to import that asset in the engine. We are going to add some more assets, so we are going to add this bark asset. After that we are going to add this plant asset. After that you can add some fallen leaves. And lastly we are going to add a decal for additional detail. So again you can just search what I've searched there. Now if you go in the 3D assets folder, you'll see all of your assets there. So every asset is in its individual folder. To view all of these assets at once, I like to add a filter. So just add a static mesh filter, and that way you can view all of these assets at once. So now let's drag this embankment asset in the scene. Reset its location to the origin. Select it and press your F key to focus on that asset. And lighting is a key factor in environment art. So I'm going to change the lighting a lot throughout the environment creation process. After that you can duplicate that asset by Ctrl D. After that I'm going to add the tree bark asset. Now our light looks good, but we have some harsh lighting. Our lighting is not soft. So to soften the light a bit, we are going to add volumetric clouds. And the moment you add the clouds, you can see that we have a soft lighting profile, like the shadows and everything are soft. So the volumetric cloud helps to soften everything. So now I'm going to rotate this like that. And I'm just trying to blend this with the ground. Okay, so now here what I'm going to do is, I'm going to open up the material, and in the material we have some options for saturation, brightness and contrast. So I'm trying to match this tree asset as closely as possible to my ground. Now you can add additional assets if you want. So I'm going to add these rock assets and position them like that. Okay, now it's time to scatter some smaller elements on the ground. So we are going to add this asset in the scene. Again, the process of adding assets is similar. You just need to drag the asset from the content browser into your level. So I'm just positioning these assets, just rotate them, scale them. And to further blend these assets, again, you can open up the material and you can change the contrast and the brightness of the texture. I'm going to select all the leaf assets and I'm going to turn off decals. So just turn off receive decals in the details panel, and this will make sure that our leaves are not affected by decals. We only want the decal to affect the ground, right? So similarly, I'm going to select the tree bark right there and turn off receive decals. We are going to go in the decals folder and we are going to just drag the material onto the ground. This will automatically convert this material to a decal actor. So I'm going to go in the properties and just scale this down so you'll have a decal scale size. Don't scale this with the scale tool. That will create a lot of problems. Use the decal scale size property to scale this. Now I'm going to duplicate that decal object and you can scatter this all over your ground. So you have an additional layer of detail now. So we have the decal, we have the leaves, and we have the ground texture. So everything is looking a lot more detailed. You could also scatter some rocks and pebbles if you wanted to. Now we are going to add some foliage in the scene. So I'm not going to use the foliage tool as we don't have a landscape. I'm going to make more videos on landscapes and landscape painting and foliage later. So I'm going to add these foliage assets and place them all over my level. After you have added foliage, you can select all of them and you can turn off decals. Now let me show you how you can add some wind to the foliage. So foliage downloaded from Quixel Bridge already has a wind parameter. So just select any one of these foliage assets and open up the first material. As you can see, we have some wind parameters. So to see this, you need to enable the grass wind. The default wind properties look pretty good. So now we have some subtle wind to the foliage. Okay, so now the first part of this video is over. So we have created an environment. So in the second part of this video, we are going to take a look at rendering techniques. I've got a lot of messages of you guys saying that the render doesn't look good. It doesn't look sharp and crisp. So for that sharp and crisp look, the first thing that you need to check is the screen percentage. Make sure that your screen percentage is set to 100. So the screen percentage value is basically rendering this at a higher quality. So if this is set to 150, it will render it at a resolution 150 times more than the current resolution, and then it's going to downscale it to the current resolution. There's one more thing that you can do to get sharper results. So you can just use this console command, and this is going to sharpen your scene. Let's create a camera animation. So first we'll need to add a camera for that. And to add a camera, you can go right there and add a cinematic camera actor. So this is a special type of camera used for cinematic purposes. Now you can select the camera and snap it to the viewport. Now to enable the camera view, you can go right there and you can select the camera. In the details panel, you can change this film back to 16:9 DSLR. So that's basically the sensor size of your camera. After that, we have lens settings. So I'm going to add some custom values here. For this scene, I'm going to use a wide angle lens. So I'm going to use a value of 22 millimeters. After that, let's fix the brightness thing. So let's search for post process. You can set the post process blend weight to 0. This will make sure that we are using the scene's post process volume settings and not the camera's post process volume settings. After that, let's change the focus settings. So you can go down and under the focus settings, you can change the focus method to tracking and you can select any object that you want to focus on. Here I'm going back and forth and changing the lighting of my scene. Lighting is like a key factor to create photorealistic elements. Lighting can break or make your scene. So it's really important that you have good lighting and good shadows. This will completely depend on the mood that you are trying to establish. So feel free to experiment with the lighting in your scene. Now let's get into the rendering. So first let's start by rendering out a still image. The easiest way to render a still image is to use the high resolution screenshot. So once you click that, it is going to open the high resolution screenshot render settings. So the first setting is very important. That's the resolution multiplier. So by default it's set to 1. I think 1 is like 720p. So a value of 2 is like 2 times 720p. And a value of 4 is 4K, I think. So make sure that you set this to a value of 2. If you go beyond 4, Unreal Engine can crash as this takes a lot of memory. So after you have set the number there, you can just press the capture button to capture a still image. Now let's go ahead and let's create an animation. So to create an animation, we need an animation sequence. So we need to create a level sequence. You can save this asset. And once you save this asset, it's going to open up the sequencer panel. So the sequencer is nothing but the timeline. So we have the timeline slider. You can set that to any frame you want by typing the frame number there. Here you can set your frame rate. By default it's set to 30 frames per second. Down there you can change the length of the timeline. I want this animation to be 200 frames long. So I'm going to snap the timeline slider to 200 frames. That red line denotes the end of your animation. So you can move that red line to 200. So now our animation is from frame 0 to 200. And we are rendering this at 30 frames per second. Okay, so now it's time to animate the camera. So to animate the camera object, you need to drag the camera object from the world outliner into the sequencer. So now the camera is part of a sequence, and here I'm going to create a simple zoom in animation. So I'm going to add a transform keyframe on frame 0. After adding a keyframe, you're going to see a red dot right there. After that, you can go to the last frame and just move your camera inwards and add a transform keyframe. So let's play the animation, and you can see that we have created a very simple camera animation. It's time to render the animation. So for rendering this, we need to enable a plugin. So go to Edit, Plugins, and you can search for Movie Render Queue. Make sure that you enable both of those plugins. You might need to restart the editor. After you have enabled the plugins, you can go to Cinematics, and you will see a new option called Movie Render Queue. So just click on that. That will open up a new window called the Movie Render Queue. Now to render our sequence has to be in the Movie Render Queue. So let's add our sequence in the Movie Render Queue. After adding our sequence, you can click on the settings. So we are going to delete the JPEG sequence, and instead of that, we are going to add a PNG sequence. So PNG images have less compression. In the output, we have output settings. So this is where your images are going to be stored. You can define the resolution. You can also define the frame rate here. So we are going to render this at 30 frames per second. So this is looking pretty good. Now you can click the plus button in the settings, and we are going to add an additional thing called anti-aliasing. So this anti-aliasing thing will give you high quality renders. So here you have two important settings that you need to know. The first setting is the spatial sample count, and the second setting is called the temporal sample count. So the spatial sample count and the temporal sample count basically multiply. So if you set your spatial sample count to 2 and your temporal sample count to 16, those values are going to multiply, and that is going to give me a total sample count of 32. After that, you need to override anti-aliasing and set it to none. Down here, you can also enable warm-up frames. So just save that and accept it. Now everything is looking pretty good. So finally, you can press the render local button to render out your animation. Okay, so now the last part is to convert those images into a video file. So I'm going to use DaVinci Resolve for this. You can use any video editing application you like. The process is very similar. So here, as you can see, I've created a small animation. So in Resolve first, I'm going to create a timeline. After that, let's import our images. So import media and go to the folder where your images are stored. And to import this, you need to select all of these images. So this will import these images as a clip. Now let's configure the properties of our imported images. So let's go to clip attributes. And here the important thing is the frame rate. So we need to match this frame rate to the Unreal Engine frame rate. We also need to set our timeline frame rate. I'm going to change it to 30 frames per second. So now my timeline and my image sequence have the same frame rate. So what I can do is I can add the image sequence in the timeline. And as you can see, that's how easy it is to convert this to a video clip. Now you can do some color correction and post-processing if you want. But I'm going to render this out like that. So to render this in Resolve, you need to go to the deliver page. In the deliver page, you can specify the file name, the location, you can specify the format and the codec. So everything looks good. So now finally, you can add this to the render queue. And in the render queue, you can render this out. I hope you learned a lot from this video. If you did, please leave a like down below. Also, you can subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. You can check out my Patreon page. And yeah, that's it. I'm going to see you in the next video.